Hi guys, Noah here. I wanted to start this vlog because I had gotten some suggestions from some friends and family members of mine that it might do me some good to kind of talk about my life experiences and the day-to-day what goes on to be someone who has bipolar disorder, as well as some requests of people that I've talked to who are currently going through the diagnosis process, who are going through the treatment process. To kind of share my experiences with that, I wanted to share some of the things I wish I had have known right after I'd gotten diagnosed. I want to correct some misconceptions, not only that I feel like a lot of other people have, but that I had, right after I got diagnosed. And I wanted to share my experience with my diagnosis, as well as to maybe give you a kind of a little window into my life and kind of how I go about dealing with my disorder, how I am supposed to go about dealing with my disorder, and hopefully to catalog and make a chronology of my progress. At the current time, I'm 27 and I've been diagnosed officially for about 3 or 4 years at this point. And I say officially because I feel like, and talking to my family members, they feel like I'd probably been suffering longer than the official diagnosis. Excuse me. So the starting place, I think, for me, logically, is going to be my diagnosis story and kind of the lead up to it. So for the lead up, when I was a child, I suffered from some pretty bad depressive episodes. I was going through it a lot at the time. I've been it's gonna be interesting to talk about. My sister is diagnosed with leukemia at a young age. We were 6, I think, when she was officially diagnosed, and we were kind of dealing with that from a young age. My father's family had always been less than reputable. I'm not sure the best way to say that, but they have always had drug issues and crime issues and mental health issues in general. My father, while I love him, was not perfect, and looking back, while he never had a diagnosis, I'm fairly certain if he had gotten treatment, he would have been diagnosed as being or having bipolar disorder, some kind, bipolar 1 or bipolar 2. But I'm very confident he would have been on the spectrum. When I was quite young, also dealing with my sister's leukemia, there was some there's some other trauma that I'm not going to go into on this particular vlog, but one thing to note, the reason I bring all of this up is that there are a lot of people who are genetically predisposed to these mood disorders, to bipolar disorder, and it doesn't necessarily mean that because you have a genetic predisposition that you're guaranteed to show symptoms, but there is a statistical link between childhood trauma and developing it later in life. So it is relevant that there was a history of trauma. But I digress. Childhood, I suffered from some pretty severe depressive episodes. And then fast forward a little bit, I was about 14, 15, when I feel like I had my first real manic episode. I was talking unbelievably fast. Not that I had never done that before, mind you, but I had a lot of energy. It was an unusual amount of energy for me. And my parents noticed, and they were a little concerned. I did eventually end up going to a doctor and getting on Zoloft as an antidepressant, which one thing I wish I would have known then is that Zoloft is not an antidepressant that my body can readily absorb and break down. Later, when I was about 25, it was very shortly after I had first gotten diagnosed, I did a gene test, genetic test, that was meant to help figure out what the best medication for me would be. And it was determined that I had genetic markers that suggested that Zoloft and Prozac were medications that my body would not readily absorb and use to their full potential. So that's something I wished I would have known about, because the Zoloft did not do as much as I felt like it should. I did feel better, but it's kind of like putting a Band-Aid on a bullet wound. It's only going to do so much. So fast forward a little bit. I was married at the time, and my ex-wife had realized that I was having some pretty severe issues. My depression was getting bad. I was having very severe anxiety. I would have these episodes where I would get very overwhelmed and overworked, and I would kind of claw at my face or like at my skin or whatever was readily available. Thankfully, I keep my nails pretty short, so I didn't really do any damage. And I would have these horrible bouts of just like paranoid anxiety. It was awful. So we went to a psychiatrist and we said, hey, this is what's going on. My psychiatrist noted that, your anxiety's off the chart. It's out there. And she said that your depression's pretty bad, but your anxiety's out there. And I told her, I have a family history of bipolar disorder. I have several people on my mother's side, actually both my mother's siblings, as well as a few other people in my mom's side of the family, and then several people confirmed and unconfirmed in my father's side of the family. And I was telling her about there would be spans of, weeks where I would be sleeping, 3-4 hours a night, and just not missing it much. There's not much of a way to describe it. I'd be running off of a very there's this very frenetic paced energy. It's almost like a drugged up energy. It doesn't feel natural. It doesn't feel comfortable. And the other way to describe it is I was very irritable, very irritated. I felt like I had like a beehive stuck in my head. It was always noisy. It was always buzzing. It wouldn't stop. And the thoughts would constantly race. My inhibitions were relatively low at that point when I would go through that. I wouldn't think as logically as I normally would. I try to be a very logical person, but I would struggle very, very hard to be logical, and I would do things that were impulsive and dangerous and rather crazy. Part of that, and part of what kind of exacerbated those manic episodes, is that I was on the entire time on an antidepressant, but no mood stabilizer. One of the worst things you can do is to be bipolar on a antidepressant only, because that can send you off into a horrible manic episode, and those are rarely fun. But speaking of my psychiatrist, it turned out that what I was having was considered mixed manic episodes. That my mania was not the stereotypical happy-go-lucky, fun type mania. Um, and one of my misconceptions of mania always had to be this fun, exciting mania. I didn't realize that you could have an unpleasant mania. So I had been diagnosed at that point bipolar type 2. And type 2 means that my manic states were not severe. I would do stupid, reckless, dangerous things, but I wouldn't do anything overly crazy, I guess. It's kind of hard to explain. The manic episodes that are very, very severe usually involve people getting up at 2 o'clock in the morning and cleaning and being up for 2 hours and severe promiscuity and drug use, and there's the feeling is different. I've since had one or two true manic episodes, and it's the difference between having a sugar high and having a cocaine high. It's very different. One of the misconceptions I think that a lot of people have is that people who have bipolar disorder always kind of fit into that crazy mania, but there are several classes that are more less severe mania, or mixed mania, which mine tend to be mixed. So we eventually got the bipolar 2 diagnosis. One thing to note is that most, and this is a misconception I had, is that I thought bipolar episodes didn't have triggers, and they do. They have very clear triggers. Lack of sleep, severe stress, bad diet, several things can trigger a bad episode. And I had a particularly bad episode when my ex-wife left. And at that point, I had moved to, my home state and was really struggling, and ended up having a severe kind of manic episode, and actually ended up getting treatment for it. And in the hospital, I was diagnosed as bipolar type 1. So my official diagnosis is bipolar type 1 with mixed states. And it gets even crazier than that, because then you talk about treatment resistant. They added treatment resistant to my little block because normal mood stabilizers do not tend to work for me. They actually put me on a anti-seizure medication off-label as my mood stabilizer, which has done amazing. It kind of messes with my short-term memory, but for the most part, it's great. YouTube only gives me like 15 minutes, so video is probably going to get cut here soon. But this was kind of the first blog entry, and that's my diagnosis story, and kind of how I got to my ultimate diagnosis of bipolar type 1. And the next video, I think I will address kind of my misconceptions and the misconceptions that I feel like other people have about the diagnosis, as well as some of the things I wish I had known ahead of time, and some things I wish that other people would know about me. So I'll see you guys next time.